Hey gang, I'm Joe Edelman and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Tonight, something a little bit different. How to photograph kids sports like a pro. I'm going to take a deep dive through my entire process, show you that honestly, it's a very similar process to photographing portraits and models and landscapes and just about anything else, actually. Also, I've got a DIY tip and of course the exclusive last frame photography Q&A. So start typing. I'll do my best to answer all of your questions in the next 60 minutes. And if you're watching live, you know the drill. Please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. And hey, if you're watching the replay, thank you. No worries about the name and where you're from. Drop it as a comment below the video. That way, I know you were here. All right, already tonight, let's see. We got Gabe. Haven't seen Gabe in a while. Good to see you, Gabe, in Miami. We got Lynn in New York. Jay in Southern Colorado. Picture affix from Hamburg, Germany. Awesome. Elaine made it here from upstate New York. David in San Diego. Let's see. Spectrum Man just came in from Locust Grove, Georgia. Jeremy in Virginia Beach. I know, let's see. Mike is here from up in, I think, Canada. Calvin in Maine. We got people from all over the place already. All of you. You're part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I'll work really hard to help you with your photography tonight. So remember, it would help a lot more people learn about The Last Frame. Do me a solid, hit the thumbs up below the video. It's not for my ego, it's for the algorithm. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube recommends the show to other photographers. And of course, while you're down there, feel free to go ahead and hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Or you can go ahead and share the link, lastframe.live, Facebook, Twitter, and I guess now Threads. They're the fastest way to get the word out. So I am happy to say that nothing is particularly exciting in news for us to talk about this week. I will let you know, in fact, let me just get it up on my screen here so that I can share it with you. Next Monday, so that's going to be July 24th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time in the US, and that's 8 p.m. East, well, not Eastern, but 8 p.m. in the UK if you're in England. I'm going to be presenting a 1-hour talk, which is actually kind of a favorite topic of mine. It's called The Power of Why. So I'm inviting you to join me for this free workshop as I explain how to answer, or how the answer to why. Honestly, it has guided me to success at every turn in my career, not just from a business standpoint, but in terms of the quality of my photography and my ability to photograph the things that I do. So your own success with the power of why. So I'll explain how that answer can be used to make tasks easier, used to keep your clients happier, and ultimately help you achieve your goals. And I'll share my secrets on how to use the power of why to achieve overall success. So listen, this is a free workshop. You do need to sign up for a free Daisy account if you're not already a member of the Daisy platform, but it doesn't cost you anything. I'm going to drop a link in the chat here. There is also a link in the show notes below the video. Okay? All right, so this week's DIY. Let's do the DIY before we get onto the topic for the night, because this one's it's kind of a fun one and it's a simple one. And this goes back to a little trick that I learned, honestly, when I was probably about 14 or 15 years old. And it doesn't get talked about enough anymore. It still works. It's not something that was, exclusive to film or anything like that. And it's all about starbursts. And it's ultimately as simple as F16 in peaking or F22 and in your face. It's kind of like a reference to F8 and be there, which, by the way, if you don't know what F8 and be there means, if you've never heard that phrase, it's an expression that was commonly used by newspaper photographers to indicate the importance of taking the opportunity for the picture rather than being too concerned about using the best technique. Often it was attributed to the iconic New York City photographer Ouija, And basically the phrase represented a philosophy in which the occasion, the action, is much more important than reflection and thinking about it. But starbursts. So you probably are aware that you can go out and you can spend, a fair amount of money buying starburst filters, okay? And these starburst filters, you screw them onto the front of your lens and they will basically at any point light source, light bulb, street lamp, the sun, you name it, they will give you a starburst effect with multiple, points on the star. They're not cheap. And there's all kinds of variations of them. You can get ones that give you 4 points, 6 points, 8 points. You can give ones that are variable, so you can adjust them like a variable neutral density filter or a polarizing filter. You can get ones that actually will give you specific color streaks. I don't have a hack for that one yet, okay? But my hack, and I don't have a piece here to show you because I wasn't going to go cut a piece. I haven't done this in a while, but you may have it sitting around the house, and if not, you can get it cheap at Home Depot because you don't need a lot of it. And my hack is a simple piece of window screen. Look at that filter. Notice the grid work in the glass. It basically looks like window screen, right? But I'm going to take the hack a whole step further. I want to get away from using the filter. So actually, let's finish the window screen. With a piece of window screen, you simply hold it in front of your lens and you can rotate it and it will change the directionality of the starburst. If you get really thin window screen, which there is such a thing available, and remember, you need less than a foot of this stuff, right? So you don't need to buy a ton, but you could overlay 2 pieces. Now, once you overlay 2 pieces, 2 things will happen to your image. Neither is bad. You just need to be aware that it's going to happen. What you're going to start to see in camera, it's going to darken your image a little bit, so you will need to adjust your exposure accordingly. That's easy, right? And it may appear to reduce the contrast slightly in your image. I shouldn't say appear to. It may reduce the contrast in your image. That's okay too. This is one of those situations where as long as you're aware of it, in other words, I know this image is going to be slightly lower in contrast than I ideally want to be, that is the perfect scenario for fix it in post. It's not saying, oh, that looks like crap, I'll fix it later. It's saying, I understand why that's happening. I'm making a conscious decision to go ahead and shoot with slightly less contrast because I want the extra set of points on my stars. And literally all you're going to do is adjust the contrast in post-production. Now, my advice is don't use the contrast slider. I would actually encourage you to use the clarity slider if you're a Photoshop or Lightroom person, or better yet, for even finer control, work with the 4 sliders that are highlights, shadows, blacks, and whites. They're going to give you more control. But there's a way to do this without even using the window screen. And that is what I mentioned in the very beginning, F16 or F22, right? So I'm going to show you an example here. Oh, by the way, there's examples of starburst filters, right? Copyright things. I can't blow them up and show you a specific image, but I'm showing you, Google search results here, right? So, you can see basically when you use one of these filters, you can get various shapes of the points of light depending on which filter you buy, etc. But without a filter, okay, you can do a shot like this at F16 and basically hide the sun partially behind, in this case, a set of trees. And you'll notice it has the starburst. The blue was not a filter. The blue was simply done in Adobe Camera Raw, right? So not even any trickery or presets or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of do the turn day into night effect and create that star because now it looks like it's a photograph of the moon peeking through the trees in a dark forest. right? Another example of this, and I'm going to show you kind of a stepped up example. So here's a real simple shot. I did this out in Tucson, Arizona a couple years back when I was out there for an Olympus event and out wandering in the desert and ultimately getting lost in the desert, but that's a whole nother story. So these series of shots were done with an Olympus camera, the OMD EM1 Mark III. In fact, this was the very first day that I had used that camera ever. They had just handed it to us. So these are shot at f/16. And you can see the sun is mostly exposed. It's only a little bit behind the cactus. So if I move it a little bit further behind the cactus, now I start to get the starburst in the shadow area, right, where the cactus is. If I move it a little bit more behind, now I found kind of that sweet spot where I get a bigger flare. And if I move it ever so slightly more, then I have the real sweet spot where I get a lot more flare. So part of the moral to the story is if you're out and about, so also what I'm trying to tell you is you definitely don't need to go buy a filter, right? Because they're expensive. And then that's one more piece of kit that you got to carry around. If you're going to use it all the time, cool, go for it. If you've got money to blow and, you know, it's like you like to have every piece of gear, cool, go for it. But otherwise, no, look, I make my living with this stuff. I can't justify buying one of those filters. They're nice and they're convenient, but I'm not going to carry that around. That's just more weight, right? So anytime you have this idea to do this concept, to shoot it at f/16 or f/22, all you need to make sure you do is experiment a little bit, right? Try some frames with the sun peeking out a lot, the sun barely peeking out. You can move back and forth. And you notice basically my composition did not change in any of those shots. So it's not a matter of, you know, you've got to do wildly different things. It's just those small adjustments, and try shooting some at f/16 and try shooting some at f/22. Obviously, when you go from 16 to 22, you either need to bump your ISO up by one stop, so double the number, or you need to go to a one stop slower shutter speed, so halve the number. In other words, like 1/500th go down to 1/250th, right? And that balances everything out. So the picture is going to have the same amount of light and dark to it, but it will have an impact on the starburst. You can do a little bit of simple experimentation with your lenses, because one of the things that does have an impact on what your star looks like is how many blades are in the diaphragm of the lens, right? So this is not a one-size-fits-all answer. It will vary a little bit depending upon the lens that you do this with. In my experience, I also tend to like it more with wider lenses than longer lenses, but it'll work with a 500 millimeter lens and it'll work with a 16 millimeter lens, okay? So, hi, Charlie. Sorry that you're having problems, but my show's not having a trouble. I've got a good stream out. You're having bandwidth issues. I saw your note there. Just want to let you know. Maybe you want to refresh the page, okay? All right, so again, cool technique that you can play with. There's an even bigger one there. There's a couple other shots. I didn't want you to think they all had to be like those just bland, you know, silhouettes. You can have lots of color in them also different times. In this case, it's a combination of the sun getting really low to the horizon, so it's not as bright. So you notice I didn't have to hide as much of it. Practically the whole sun is there, right? So costs you nothing, a lot of fun to play with, and if you want to take it up a notch without spending the big bucks for the filters and without having to carry filters around, because if you've got multiple lenses with different filter thread sizes, then, you know, well, which lens can I use it on? What if I want to use it on this other lens? Am I going to buy another filter? Am I going to buy step-up rings? No, just take a piece of window screen. Might be a good idea if you have a roll of gaffer's tape. Once you cut the square, and cut it a little big for what you're going to need it, take some gaffer's tape and just create edging around it, because that window screen material, number one, it can get a little bit rough on the edges. Number two, when you're handling it and going to put it in front of your glass, in the event that you get sloppy, you don't want to run the edge of the window screen across the front optic of your lens, right? So again, something to play with, have some fun with. I encourage you, try it out. It's one of those tricks. It's like, one more kit in the toolkit that you can have some fun with. All right? Okay. So, our topic tonight is kids sports and shooting kids sports so that they look like professionals, right? Now, I mentioned in the beginning, and here I'm just going to go ahead and flip the browser over here for some images I'm going to show you. I mentioned in the very beginning that it's not a lot different than shooting, because I'm going to show you baseball images. Shooting baseball is not a lot different than shooting any other sport, especially when we're talking kids sports. The pictures you're going to see tonight are of 8-year-olds, and then you're also going to see some of 4-year-olds, okay? Or excuse me, 5-year-olds, but mostly 8-year-olds. Here's the thing. I also mentioned that it's not a whole lot different than shooting landscapes or portraits or models or anything else. And what I'm referring to is the idea that what is really going to make the difference is not the gear. Because I'm going to show you some kind of high-end gear, but then I'm also going to explain to you how to do it with really basic gear. What's going to make the difference is the planning and the prep. And making sure that you understand what you're walking into, making sure that you understand what the parameters are, making sure that you have a goal. Instead of the word goal, I'm going to call it making sure that you have an assignment. I talked about that program I'm going to do next Monday on the 24th, The Power of Why. That's the assignment, is know your why. What am I trying to accomplish with the photos, right? So let me give you a little bit of my why. Then I'll tell you about my gear. Then we'll look at some images, and you can decide if I have done a good job of meeting my own why or my own assignment. So the why/assignment for me is obviously my son and daughter-in-law would love to have photographs of both of my grandsons playing baseball. My oldest grandson, who is 8, he's about to turn 9. He lives baseball. It is his life. Throughout the course of a year, he plays on 3 different baseball teams. This year, he had the good fortune of playing on 2 different all-star teams. So baseball is life. My youngest grandson, he played his first year this year of quickball. Quickball is a sport that a lot of little leagues use now as an introductory sport. They use very, very soft balls, and it's mostly a skills game where they have to toss into a target. They do some batting with a plastic bat. They do a lot of base running, and they play, honestly, almost like a kickball version of baseball. They're still using a bat and a ball, but there's no gloves, really soft balls. It's really kind of slow going. So it kind of gets them into the skills. The league that my grandkids play in, they do that in place of, some of you may be familiar with the idea of T-ball, right? So my goal, number one, obviously for my son and daughter-in-law, is to get some nice pictures of their kids, because that's what they're hoping for. And for me, I want nice pictures of my grandkids. But I take it to another level because I can have a little bit more fun with it this way. I want to create a set of images of, especially the oldest one who's, playing on the teams, a set of images that when he looks back at these images 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, are going to make him feel like he was a pro baseball player at age 8. I want these images to show him as even better than he is. And he's really good. But I want these images to show him as even better, even more skilled, even more pro. I also want to be able to put together some kind of a storyline. Now, when I start each baseball year, and this is the 3rd year that I've done this, when I start each baseball year, I don't know exactly what the storyline is going to be. So as I'm going through these 3 seasons that he plays the in-house Little League in the spring. In the summer, he's on a travel team. That's the blue uniforms that you see here. And then in the fall, he'll play what's called fall ball. As I'm going through the first 2 seasons and into the fall, I'm looking for a storyline. because for the last 2 Christmases, and I will do it again this Christmas. In fact, he's already requested it. For Christmas, I give him a book, and I make a book. The first year, it was called A Championship Season, and I should have had the books here. I'm sorry. I'll make it a point to show them to you all next week. But it was called A Championship Season because in his very first year of Little League, he got to play in a championship, and his team won, which of course was very exciting. And they got to play their championship game or their all-star game. They played under the lights, which at that age, also very, very exciting. Second year, the book was called The Faces of Baseball because he makes tons of faces, tongues sticking out, all kinds of stuff. So the entire book was built around all of these different facial expressions that he has, and there's many of them. So it's actually kind of really funny. This year, I'm honestly not sure exactly, what it's going to be. His in-house Little League team won a championship. The in-house championship, he was able to participate in what's called a Rising Stars tournament, and his team won the Rising Stars tournament. He was also on the All-Star team. So he's having a great year. And now his travel team has won all but, I believe, 3 of their games, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So, he's having an absolutely great year. Okay. Story-wise, though, I don't know exactly where it's going to go. So let's talk about gear. So that's kind of the setup. That's my why, right? As far as the gear goes, so you can see behind me over there, I'm shooting with a Sony a7 IV, and I am currently using the Sony 200 to 600. That's a 5.6 to 6.3 lens. Now, you may recall, up until very recently, I was shooting my baseball with the Tamron 150 to 500, which was a 6.3 to 6.7. I love that lens. I love the price of that lens much better than the price of this one, okay? But, and by the way, the warranty, the Tamron, 6 years. The Sony, 1 year, right? So it's a much more expensive lens, much bigger lens, much heavier lens. But here's the piece that made me switch to this lens. So this wasn't, just I've got gas, let's go buy a new piece of gear thing. No, because it was actually quite expensive. I even traded in some gear to get it. Sony didn't cut me a break. I didn't get it for free. I bought it full tilt from an online retailer, okay? The reason I did that is that the Tamron 150 to 500, again, very happy with the lens, love the lens. It is a lens that expands when you zoom it. If you shoot baseball games, especially in the summer, all that dirt that you see under the kids' feet on a windy day especially, it kicks up and you leave the games, your gear is coated in dust. Now, the dust blows off or wipes off, right? But this is his 3rd year of playing baseball. He's got a lot of years to come, assuming he sticks with it, which is up to him, but pretty sure bet he's going to. That means my concern was that over time, that's going to be an awful lot of dust that's potentially getting racked back into that lens when I'm zooming in and out during a game. Now, believe me, the lenses are sealed to a degree, but still, repeated use and the fact that I had to leave every game and really clean it and make sure that I was getting inside that barrel as far down as I could, it was a lot of work. That's why I went ahead and switched the lens. And that's the only reason. It's not at all that I was unhappy with that Tamron. Loved it. Loved the size, the weight, price, like I said, everything. The Sony is fully contained. So all the zooming happens inside. It's more weather sealed. As I mentioned, the Sony, in addition to being a lot more expensive, it is a lot bigger. It's a lot heavier. And one of the really weird things that Sony does, I shouldn't say weird, but lazy things that Sony does with that lens is it doesn't come with an Arca Swiss foot. The foot on it is really short, meaning the lens doesn't balance on the foot. And the only way to mount that lens on a tripod is using the tripod screws underneath the foot. most photographers, not all, but most photographers today work with Arca Swiss. Some work with Manfrotto, some still just use the screws, but the majority, of the mounts out there are Arca Swiss. So fortunately, you can change the mount on the lens. In fact, just so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. The Sony mount, if you go online and look for a picture of this lens, the foot on the Sony is white, of course. Doesn't have the Arca Swiss threads, which you can see there. In fact, here, I'll bring that back to there. Does not have the Arca Swiss threads on the bottom. And you can see how much longer this one is. Also, for the Sony a7 IV, the bottom of the camera and the foot allow the lens to sit perfectly balanced. It doesn't tip forward at all, right? On the base of it, it's got a 1/4-20 and a 5/8 thread. The 5/8, very important. If you're gonna mount a lens of this size and weight onto a tripod or a monopod, you either want to do it with an Arca Swiss grip or the 5/8, the bigger hole, not the 1/4-20. So I do shoot using a monopod. Where did I put it? Let me set the lens down. I do shoot using a monopod. There's an article on my website about this. I'll add this to the description underneath the video later. This is the Siriu. It's a carbon fiber. I love it because it weighs like nothing, okay? One thing that some of you with monopods, you may have this feature and you may not know it. So you'll notice this has a 5/8 head on it, right? But while I have it there in focus, let me see if I can take this apart and show you. A lot of monopods, better monopods, will do this. You can take the top off and unscrew the pin and flip it so that you now have a 1/4-20 if you just want to mount a regular camera without a heavy lens. So before you rush out and buy a new monopod to put it on a big lens, make sure that you can't actually flip your head. With this particular Siriu, I can. So this way I'm mounting the camera onto a monopod that is a 5/8 thread, makes everything super, super solid, super safe, and using the Wimberley foot, okay? Other gear that I take with me, I take two bodies, both Sony a7 IVs when I shoot games. The second body will have one of two lenses on it. It will either have the Tamron 17-28, that's a 2.8 really wide zoom, which I like for doing close-ups when the coaches are talking to the teams or for group shots afterwards, that kind of stuff. Or for night games when it gets really dark, remember that lens, that big lens is a 5.6 to 6.3. I'll take my Tamron 70-180 f2.8, right? So once it finally gets too dark and I'm beyond my ISO tolerance using that lens, then I'll switch over to the 70-180. And what I do is I turn on APS-C shooting, which Sony's have, a lot of camera brands have them now. It's a setting where you can go in and basically have the camera work, if your full frame camera, work as an APS-C camera. So at that point now, this becomes, it goes all the way up to 270 millimeter when it's on APS-C. So I've got almost a 300 millimeter 2.8 here, right? So certainly it's not going to get me as close from as far a distance as the big lens, but if I change my shooting location, I can still do really good stuff with this lens. All right, so the two cameras, three lenses, that's what goes with me. The other important thing that goes with me is this little Cozy Speed case. It's a belt strap type case that you wear on your hip, okay? It's almost kind of like a camera bag version of a fanny pack, really, right? They call this one the Street-O-Matic. These come out of Germany, and I love these, actually. I think they were originally designed to be used for compact type cameras, okay? But for me, I will wear one of these for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've got a little extra space in here, but what I keep in them in this front pouch, these are eyeglass wipes. Now, if you don't have eyeglasses, you don't need this or have to worry about it. But if you wear eyeglasses, you understand my pain, right? Especially like the last 2 weekends where it's been really hot here in the Northeast and really, really humid. I'll clean my glasses 3 or 4 times during a baseball game. So I have plenty of eyeglass wipes that I can just pop out, open them up, and I'm good to go, right? On the back side of it, actually, that's my little medicine pouch. That's where I have like, ibuprofen and stuff like that. Because, at my age, sometimes you need those things, right? Inside, I carry 2 battery pouches. These are Tenba battery pouches, the actual pouch for spare batteries, okay? So they hold 2 spare batteries for my Sony. I want to show you also a little trick with something like this. And these you can wear these on your belt if you want, but I don't want to wear them on my belt. I stick them in the case. But I want you to notice the way that I set these up here. If I can get it to refocus, there we go. Notice the arrows on the batteries. So that's actually from Sony. It's telling you which way the battery goes in the camera, right? But I also use that as my code in the case. If the arrow's up, come on, refocus. There we go. If the arrow's up, the battery is fully charged and ready to go. If the arrow is down, the battery is depleted because I've just removed it from the camera and switched it. So when I'm switching batteries in a hurry, I don't really have to worry about where do I put it. It's about making sure which way do I put it, right? That way it can go, because I actually have 2 of these battery cases in there. So it can go in either case. If there's an open slot, it can go in there. It's just that arrow down, battery needs to be charged. Arrow up, it's a fresh battery, good to go. So I carry those in there. Also, this little Ziploc bag, right? And I leave it in a Ziploc bag, number one, because there's a couple things in here. I don't want them to spread out and start taking out space. And my goal is to never use these during a game. But every now and then, something comes up and you have to, and they're kind of important. So in the Ziploc bag, I carry 2 sets of lens cleaners from Hoodman. They're called Lens Cleanse. I absolutely love these things. These are the best. I highly recommend them. It's a wet-dry process. You've got one wet one, one dry one, okay? I also carry, which I've never had to use on location, but this is part of my own paranoia. These gadgets called deoxit wipes. Let's get that up there with the camera focuses. Deoxit, right? Deoxit wipes, these are what you're going to use on any kind of grease or smudges or that. Not on the optics, but on the lens itself. So if you have a situation where you get that dreaded error message that your camera can't read your lens, if you swap lenses, in all likelihood, that means that the contacts on the back of your lens are dirty. So that's the stuff you clean it off with, right? And then the last thing in here is a set of lens pens, which are the lens cleaning brushes to be able to clean your lens, blow dust off, all that kind of stuff. So that's my cleaning kit, right? And then the very last thing that is in here, and some of you may laugh when you hear this and be like, oh yeah, he's an old fart. It's got nothing to do with me being old, believe me. I have this little case which still has some good old-fashioned business cards, right? Now, I am all about the tech gang. I would much rather, give people a QR code and exchange my contact information that way. That's usually my first choice. But the fact of the matter is, it's always at these kids' sporting events, and it's frequently with younger parents. They don't work that way. They actually want a business card. So I will take out a business card, okay? So that's the kit that goes with me, right? Now, let me tell you a little bit about what I do with the pictures afterwards, and then I'll walk you through how I shoot some of these, okay? When I am done a game, again, this is for, my grandson, so that's my connection, right? I post the images in an online gallery. I use SlickPick. You've heard me talk about SlickPick before. I'll make sure that I put a link in the description below the video afterwards, because I have a discount link you can use. Yes, I do make a couple dollars off of it, but you'll find this useful if you decide to go with them. And I have several galleries that are created for baseball this year. For instance, these images here in this Joey Baseball 2023 gallery, these are just my grandson, and this gallery gets shared with his other grandparents. For my son and daughter-in-law, I upload all those pictures to a Dropbox, and they take it from there. And then I have a separate one for the team. And this is the important piece. So when I go to these games, I don't just shoot my grandkids. I shoot every kid on the team, with my goal being to get great pictures of every single kid. And then I realize you can't read it very well on the screen here, but I have a little note on here for the parents of the team members, and it basically says, click on the photos, you'll see them full screen, and in the lower right-hand corner, you can download the full resolution image for free. It tells them they can do whatever they want with them, no strings attached. I have my Instagram and my Facebook handle on there, and I tell them, feel free to tag me, but it's not required. And I even give them, that's what the bottom sentence is here, I even give them a downloadable printing release, which gives them the ability to take the images to any printer or send them off to any printer. And if the printer questions the copyright aspect of it, all the printer has to do is call the number or email the number that's on the printing release, and I approve it. So I don't try to sell these to people or anything else. So why do I do it for free? A little piece of it is goodwill, but more importantly, it's access, right? The parents are thrilled when I'm at the games. They know they're going to get really cool pictures of their kids. They love having me around. They love the pictures being taken. I don't have any situations where parents are paranoid or worried about, somebody walking around taking pictures of their kids or anything like that. And even as far as the league goes, I also provide the league with pictures when they want them that they can share on social media. In fact, they're using a bunch of my pictures from this blue team that my grandson is on for a big banner for a tournament that they have coming up. Whatever they want, I let them use it, period. Okay? So the key to shooting sports, so that's a lot of the prep, right? Kind of the business model, the prep. The other key is knowing the sport. Super important. Now, I don't mean like you got to be like hardcore into the sport, but the more that you understand the sport, the better, right? So like, as an example, if you're shooting football, right? If you want to shoot the offense, you're going to line up ahead of where the offense is going. In other words, behind the defense, so that the offense is coming at you. The quarterback's throwing towards you, the running backs are running towards you, the receivers are running at you, etc. If for some reason you want to shoot defense, then you're going to line up behind the offense and you're going to shoot at the defense. So with baseball, where's your key action happen, right? Pitchers are always in the same place, so they're actually pretty easy. Hitters are always in the same place. The only change there is that some hitters bat on, right side of the plate. Some hitters bat on the left side of the plate. I love shooting what's called the travel team. That's the blue uniforms, because they're all right-handed hitters. So I don't have to worry about bouncing back and forth. That makes life a lot easier. And then you've got the three bases: first base, second base, third base. And the real question comes down to, especially with kids, how much action is going to happen at those bases. So when my grandson played for his in-house league in Little League this year, that's the orange shirt that you see, they would occasionally have some good plays at maybe first or second base, rarely third base, right? First base, the only plays you get are a guy reaching to catch the ball and the runner coming across the bag. You don't get slides. Second base is where the slides start to happen, okay? And the runner is facing towards left field when he comes into second base, and the second baseman is facing anywhere from, any part of the infield to first base to catch the ball. And then, of course, you got third base, where they're facing off the field, and the ball is likely coming from anywhere in the outfield, or for that matter, the right side of the field. So you have a lot more going on once the kids get to a point where they're starting to make plays. with this blue team, this is like the cream of the crop of that league. The kids have to try out. They go through multiple tryouts to make this team. The parents also have to spend a lot of money for the kids to be on this team. So these are kids that are committed to baseball. It's their thing. They're very, very talented. So there's a lot more action on the bases. So I'm able to shoot a lot more base action. And actually this past weekend, this was the first time that they played in a tournament where they were allowed to steal home. So for the first time in his baseball career, I also had action happening at home plate, which was great. So I just want to walk you through some of the shots that I do of my grandson, and then I'm going to show you also some from the team to show you kind of the thought process, right? So obviously with my grandson, I'm still working a lot on expressions and telling stories. Pictures of him doing base running, these two shots here, he's, on first base, and I can always count on him to have interesting expressions. He still has lots of different facial expressions. And by the way, even though it may look it in that first picture, he's not looking at me. I'm shooting with that big lens, and I'm all the way out in left field on the other side of the fence. So he's looking at second base, not at me, okay? This is with me down the first baseline shooting towards home plate, and he's headed down the base. That's the base coach. It's giving him the high five, and then even having a chat with him afterwards. I shoot stuff at the plate. When I'm shooting at the plate, sometimes I'm shooting horizontal shots like this, where I want to see the catcher, I want to see the umpire. One of the games this past weekend, it was getting dark. This particular game ended at 10 o'clock at night because of rain. They started late. So I was getting to a point where I couldn't do a whole lot with the long lens, especially not without really going crazy with the ISO. So he was out in the outfield. They made a pitching change. The coach came out to the mound. So I did a shot from behind him. So I'm moving the whole time, right? Wherever the best shots are going to be, I'm moving. It's a workout, okay? Because baseball fields are kind of big, right? This is, towards the end of the game, they finished up under the lights. The lighting's horrible. ISO's cranked. So I shot this with a 70 to 180 just to be able to kind of have a shot under the lights. But same thing, under the lights late at night. That's it. So the games, there we go. Earlier during the day, I'm going to shoot pretty much a little bit of everything. Him, waiting for a play, him batting. I do a lot of vertical shots when the kids are batting because I can get closer, really get the facial expressions. I'm hoping by now you're noticing one key element also. I want the ball in the picture whenever possible. Another key element that I want you to notice, and I've told this story before, you may have heard me tell it here, but it's one that my grandson kind of triggered this decision. Early in the season, when I was shooting this year, I showed him pictures from the very first game, and he looked at a picture of himself batting. And he said to me, "Did you Photoshop the ball in the picture?" And I was like, "No, why?" And he's like, "It's so clear. It looked like you added it." And I was like, because I had shot it, I don't know, probably like a 5,000th of a second, something like that. And indeed, the ball was crystal clear. So now I shoot at shutter speeds. And again, these are 8, 9-year-olds, right? I shoot at shutter speeds between 1 2,500th to 1 3,200 so that I still get just a tiny bit of blur when I'm shooting the balls and the bats from the side to indicate there really is motion. And I do the same thing with the pitchers, with the ball coming out of their hand. But you'll notice I'm always trying to get the ball in the shot whenever possible, okay? Trying, now especially that they're able to steal home, trying as much as possible to tell a whole story, right? And this is the kind of thing that you want to look for when you're doing pictures of the kids, right? And it's no different than when you're shooting professional sports. You want to try and tell a story. It's just that with professional sports, if you went and covered a Major League Baseball game, you can't get this camera angle, right? They don't allow photographers at this camera angle. This is part of the reason why I make nice with the parents and the league by giving them pictures. I'm on the baseball. I'm not in the field of play. I'm in foul territory, but I'm essentially in right field along the foul line, right? So I'm inside the fence, and it gives me the ability to shoot this. So, he's running towards first base, and here's one of his teammates scoring with the other team's catcher and the umpire watching, right? Because the ball's out in the outfield, and everybody's going to be safe. So whenever possible, we're trying to tell a story with him. In this particular case, he was quite excited. Now, this brings me to a point here. I screwed this shot up. A lot of people would say, you screwed up. You cut off his hand. I did. I'm ticked that I cut off his hand. But you know what? It's one of my favorite pictures. It's part of this series, okay? So one of the things that I talk about a lot is the idea of fill the frame, right? You've all heard me talk about that. So this series of images that you saw of him running down first base and getting to the base, they're full frame. That's the cropping. I'm adjusting the zoom a little bit as he's getting closer to me. I'm using autofocus tracking so that it's tracking him the whole way. But I'm not shooting really wide and then cropping later. Now, I could. If I would have done that, I would have had his hand. Am I going to beat myself up that I cut his hand off? No, I still love the picture, right? But am I also disappointed that I didn't shoot it wider? Definitely not. Because that's my kick in the butt to pay better attention and to keep working on my skills. So when you push yourself as a photographer, especially if you're going to do sports, fast-moving things where there's a lot of stuff going on and you've got to respond quickly. If you want to get really good at it, push yourself. If you want to get really good at it, work to get to the point where you actually are really good at it. Don't shoot really loose images and crop the crap out of them. You spend a lot of money for those pixels. Use the pixels. Every now and then, you're going to fail. It's no different than these kids. These kids playing baseball, the lesson that we give them all the time, if you do good 1 out of 3 times, you'll be a superstar. Failure is part of the process, right? So in that regard, I still try to keep things, as tight as possible along the way. With my grandson, if I'm in the wrong spot for this, I was in the wrong spot. Meaning, this is him going to third on that same set of plays, right? He made it to first, then he made it to second, then he's going into third. There was no way for me to get all the way around to the third baseline. In the meantime, I'm still going to shoot it because it's my grandkid, right? I'd rather have his face. That's my goal. But if I can't get there, I'm going to shoot it, right? When he's pitching on this particular field, I couldn't get close to home plate because of the way that it was set up. So I was off to the side and shot it from the side, which is absolutely fine. But here's another interesting little trick that I want to point out to you. This shot, these are taken through a chain link fence. Now, you saw how big the front of this lens is, right? So here's the cool part. A lot of you have probably put a camera lens up to a chain link fence before, maybe with like a 70 to 200 and kind of tried to shoot, through the fence. And as long as you center the lens properly in that chain link fence, you can get through it. With a 200 to 600 that's got a front element that large, the chain link fence is 2 feet in front of me. So it's 2 feet in front of the camera lens, and I'm shooting through it. It reduces the contrast fractionally, literally fractionally. So I give a little extra bump of contrast in my post-processing, and there's no chain link fence. So this is a picture that's being taken through a chain link fence, but the chain link fence is 2 feet in front. And again, that's because of the focal length, but more importantly, because I'm only shooting at about 200 millimeter for this shot, right? It's primarily because the front element is so large, it winds up just obliterating the chain link fence, and it's awesome. So I can shoot through chain link fences, etc. So all these, he plays catcher, I shoot catcher, the whole bit. Now, I want to scroll down a little bit further, and then like the end of the game when they're, shaking hands, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to shoot every element. This is where, of course, I'm going like to the wide angle lenses to tell the story. Earlier in the season, throughout the season, I change a little bit of my shooting approach very intentionally, okay? So I'm actually going to scroll down here to an earlier part of this. In fact, actually, you know what? Let me go to the team pictures, and I'm going to scroll down a couple of games, and let's see here. So you'll see also, in the course of a full game, you get all kinds of crazy action. You get action at the bases. Again, the key is get the ball in the shot. It's super, super important. Let me find some base shots wherever I can here. It's super important for me to try and have the ball in the shots when I can. And again, it's about telling the story. Another thing I love to do, I love to get the kids in midair when they're running. Always makes them feel a little bit faster, a little bit more dynamic. And you get the dirt kicking up and the dust kicking up, okay? Catchers get a good catch. The ball's always got dust, plus the catchers at this age, the catchers love the dust. The kids think the dust is cool. So they dab the gloves in the dirt, and that way when a ball comes in, it kicks up dust, which is great for pitchers, right? So again, all about getting the ball. Even if I'm going to get it after the hit, I want the ball in the shot whenever possible. For pitchers, I want that ball just coming off the fingertips, right? And again, you'll notice he's tack sharp. There's ever so slight a bit of motion on the hand, which shows that, he's throwing that ball fast, okay? And that's the goal. So let me find a couple of the other shots here that are plate shots. So, when I can't get the ball, I've at least got to have, he's got the ball, but it's in his glove, right? So I've got to have a good facial expression, interesting stuff that's happening, stuff like that. The players that I'm photographing are the ones in the dark blue shirts. I'd much rather have their faces, but this was a situation where I was not able to get around to the other side of the field in time. I'm not going to miss the play. I'm still going to shoot the play. And a perfect scenario for me, if I can't see his face, I at least want to see the back of his uniform so I can see his name. In this particular case, that didn't work out. So I'm going to shoot it anyway, right? But ideally, I want stuff like this where I've got my player, I've got the defensive player, and I've got the ball coming in. This past weekend, there were a couple of other photographers at this tournament that were shooting game action with much smaller lenses, and I actually gave them some tips that they were able to put to use. But they were very, very surprised because they were standing next to me at one point when I was out in the outfield. And for this particular play, I shot 2 frames. When I shoot the batters, I shoot 2 frames. That's it. I'm not doing really, really fast bursts at all. So yeah, if you want to do this, take some practice, take some skill. There's a couple reasons why I only shoot 1 or 2 frames. Number one, the Sony a7 IV, there is a lot of lag in the EVF. So it's almost like shooting with a DSLR, which that's not a big selling point for the a7 IV. But the a7 IV is also not the high-end Sony, right? The A1 and the A9 are the cameras that they recommend for sports. I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I don't need that. So with the a7 IV, the challenge that I have is like with a DSLR, if I see it, I didn't photograph it, right? Because it's delayed. So you learn to anticipate. You watch the body language and you learn to anticipate. The reason why it's 2 frames is only because when you have the a7 IV set on high for continuous shooting, it's almost impossible to pop off just 1 frame. It's going to pop off at least 2, even if you just dab the button a little bit. So that's why the second frame is going. Otherwise, I'm basically shooting 1 frame. I'm anticipating it and I'm shooting it, which is something I'm very proud of because it takes a lot of practice, right? This is why, one of the reasons why you hear me talk practice all the time, right? If you want to get good at shooting something, you've got to go shoot it, and you've got to do it over and over and over again, and you've got to practice it. It's just how it works, right? But here, I need to scroll down a bunch. What I wanted to show you folks, here we go. Here's a good example. One of the things that I will do earlier in the season is shoot warm-ups. And the reason why I would do the warm-ups is because, number one, you'd get the kids doing some interesting stuff with the balls. You get the kids doing some fielding. And they're actually a little bit more relaxed, meaning they're also moving a little slower. Makes it easier, right? I would also shoot some close-ups of them, which I still do during games. Let me go back to where I know I've got a whole bunch of warm-ups. This is the kind of fun stuff with, the ball, they had the breakaway bases. You want stuff kicking up as much action as you can get in the shots. That's what you want. So, the pitchers, I always try to get close-up shots of the pitchers. Stuff like this is actually taken during warm-ups before the game because the coaches don't let them chew gum during the game. But, this is the kind of stuff, parents love it. The kids love those pictures. So again, I'm always looking for close-ups, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have super long lenses, which is why I want to show you some of these, if you don't have super long lenses and you don't have the ability to get a whole lot of access, if you go early, you can shoot the kids warming up. So that's not a warm-up shot. My gosh, I thought I was going to be able to show you a bunch of warm-up shots here. Let's see. Because the best part is if you do the warm-up shots right, people can't tell that they're not game shots. Let's see here. So actually these are warm-ups. So there you can tell it's a warm-up because his whole team is standing behind him, right? But shots like these are actually during warm-ups, okay? So you can get really good action, and they're all shot with short lenses, right? Like 75 millimeter maximum focal length, right? So not super long lenses, super easy. I've had somebody ask me, let me go back up here to a batting picture. With the batting shots, some little leagues, like here, we'll just use this picture just as an example. So, you got a car out in the background, you got a fence there, and the bats lined up. Yeah, in a perfect world, I would love that to be obliterated. But here's the thing, right? So remember, in fact, this particular picture was taken with a Tamron. So this was probably at 6.3, okay? Even if I had a 300 or a 400 f2.8, and I was shooting at 2.8, the car would be blurrier, but the fence would still be there because that fence is only about 4.5 feet behind the kid, right? And I'm shooting beyond first base is where I'm shooting. So a lot of people think, well, if you got to do sports, one, you got to have those long lenses, and two, you got to, be shooting at f2.8 and that. The fact of the matter is on a baseball field, not a Major League Baseball field, but a kid's field, and even up to college, for that matter, f2.8 is not going to make a big difference. Once you get to the point where you've got them in an actual stadium and the background is quite a distance away, like it would be in a baseball stadium, then 2.8 can make a big difference in the way your background is recorded. But at this age, it makes no difference at all. So again, this is the gist. It's practice. It's shooting over and over and over again, putting yourself in the places where the plays are about to happen, and also paying attention to the game so that you're watching the game and anticipating things. Now, I mentioned my younger one plays quick ball, which is mostly like skills. So the whole thing with quick ball, it's really about the kids and their friends, and they're, goofing off. He's all big on all kind of crazy facial expressions. He goes out and he entertains himself. Every now and then, he waves at me. It's not like the older one won't even talk to me during a baseball game. The younger one, he's out there, he's telling himself stories, he's having fun. So that's really what I'm trying to shoot. I'm trying to shoot his experience, right? This year, he was very excited because he got to play with his best friend. So, at the end of the season, the two of them asked me if I would take a picture of the two of them together. And that's really what, the quick ball is. So the storyline here is it's, a 5-year-old just having fun, right? And by the way, I just want to point out, just as a push for those of you that tend to go crazy with lighting and all that kind of stuff, this is natural light, no reflectors, nothing added. Look how sweet that light is, right? So the two of them literally came up to me after a game. I'm sure my daughter-in-law will probably put them on to it. They came up to me after this game ended. It was their last game of the season, and they asked me if I would take a picture of the two of them. So I was standing about 10 feet away from the quick ball sign. So I was like, great, let me put you guys over here. And at that point, I'm aware if I do that, they're going to be backlit. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted them backlit. I knew that way with the lighter colored dirt right behind them, I'd pick up some nice rim lighting that's kicking up off of that. I have nice highlights over the top. Boom. But with all of these pictures, and this is a point, I know this has kind of become, a big one of my push, even like that picture, that's my grandson, okay? Look at how extreme the lighting is. Look at how there's detail in the sunlit part of his face, and there's detail in the shadow part of his face. In other words, correct exposure. If you don't pay attention to your exposure, you can't get that kind of balance in your pictures. So, so many of these images, I mean, there's backlit, okay? Detail everywhere it needs to be, right? So I encourage you, again, really pay attention to your exposure. That's why I use the exposure compensation dial to adjust mine on the fly, okay? And I talked a whole hour here. What I'll do is next week, I'll actually show you how I process these images, because I have a couple of little tricks that I use to also help to really bring out the players and really keep the focus where I ultimately want it to be. Okay? All right. And also, I noticed there's no questions in. So, wow, I was either that good a storyteller or you guys were really bored tonight. But thank you for coming out. I'll finish this next week because I think that there's a lot of things that you can take away and you can use from this, even if you're not going to shoot baseball, right? Okay. So, Jay, have I ever become so excited about your grandson's play that I missed a shot? Damn you, Jay. Yeah, a few times. I have, admittedly. Actually, this past weekend, he had a great catch in the outfield. It was a long fly ball. It was one, and it was at a crucial point in the game. I joked with my son afterwards, like that was the longest 6 seconds of my life because holding my breath. And I was so caught up in the game at that point, I completely watched the ball to make sure he was going to catch it and did not shoot it. It doesn't happen often, but yes, it happens. Okay. So I promise we'll wrap this up next week because I do want to try and make some more comparisons and tie things into some other things. But for now, we're out of time. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you found some value in what I shared with you tonight. Remember, hitting a thumbs up helps other people find out about the show. So go out and take some pictures this week, gang. All right? Have some fun because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios, gang. Take care.